Hi, I'm here with Ian Perry for some more cricket history. Ian, how you doing?
Hi, I'm very well, thanks. How about yourself?
I'm good. Apart from the fact that I let you down last week, I didn't do a formal introduction for you. So to our viewers, I do apologise. So Ian, without further
No worries.
ado, tell us a little bit about your sort of upbringing with cricket, if you don't mind, and your journey to date within cricket.
Um, well, I think probably the overriding word for all of that would be mediocrity. I came into cricket via probably the classic route of becoming involved with my local club initially as scorer. So I ended up scoring for the first team or playing for the thirds and then seconds and firsts, and then university, and then working through the 80s, 90s and onwards. I was working in the Thames Valley and playing for different clubs, so Maidenhead, Taplow, Bracknell, and playing league cricket, usually as wicketkeeper or opening batsman. As I say, taking turning mediocrity into an art form, um, and then after a couple of years away from the game, mostly for family reasons, I came back into it via wandering cricket, and I'm now exclusively involved with various wandering clubs, and I don't play any league cricket at all. Uh, does
Do
that
you
give you
miss any?
a,
Do you miss any of those league cricket days?
not really, because what I love now about the game is the kind of that slightly more relaxed approach where you don't want to lose, or rather you still play and do your best, but your enjoyment of the game in the moment takes over from the kind of the competitive drive. So your enjoyment is still very much based on doing well, but you'd rather lose a good game, an enjoyable game where everybody's had a really good time.
Yeah.
You'd rather lose that than scrape out a boring draw, which might be more points for the league, but would be an awful lot less enjoyable.
That's brilliant, and I mean, so really, you've been a lifelong fan and player of the game, and really
Yeah,
now you just at that stage where it's just to enjoy and make sure that you get a
absolutely.
full day out.
Exactly that. My first memories of playing cricket, apart from the usual thing of hitting a ball around in the garden with my brother, um, was I actually got into proper cricket, organised cricket, simply as an excuse to get out of having to do track and field athletics at school.
That sounds like a good plan to me, and I think I did something similar. In fact, I
It
think I remember
worked.
a time when the captain of athletics assumed I was going to be doing 1500 meter running, and I told him that I was a cricket player, so there was no chance I was going to be available.
I blagged it completely. I went to the master who's actually looking after the athletics and said, "Please, sir, Mr. Bynan said I can go and join the cricket squad." Then ran off to the cricket squad. And, "Please, sir, Mr. Hughes said I could come and join the cricket squad."
And that was that. The rest is history. And
Yes,
speaking of
absolutely.
history, then, Ian, so what have you got for us today? I think we've got a section on game changing women. I wonder what you've managed to uncover.
Yes, I was doing a little bit of digging through. I mean, one of my favourite sources is John Major's absolutely brilliant book, More Than Just a Game. I found a lovely reference in 1741 to Sarah Cadogan, the second Duchess of Richmond, and Charlie Lennox, the second Duke of Richmond, and the Duchess are known across the game as some of the a couple of the very early patrons of the game, and very important in the early building of some momentum behind the game. But she was also a very enthusiastic sponsor of women's cricket, and there's one of the earliest references is in 1741. So it's really early in the establishment of the game as an organised activity. This is between Slindon and East Dean, absorbed now into one of the villages in Hampshire.
Okay.
And then 1741, the Whitehall Evening Post referred to a game that was sponsored by her.
Fantastic.
The Elizabeth Smith Stanley, the Countess of Derby, was another very keen player about 30 years later, and she apparently sponsored an 11 to play against the Ladies of Quality and Fashion at the Oaks at Woodmanstone in Surrey, which I think is marvellous. But then probably the most famous of the early female game changers was Christiana Hodges, or Christiana Willis as she was originally. And she and her brother John are credited with being one of the more instrumental actors in bringing round arm bowling into the game. Apparently Tom Walker at the Hambledon Club had actually been the first purveyor of round arm bowling about 20 years before, but it kind of died out quite rapidly. Because I think because it was so radical, it was too radical for its time. And the story goes in around about the start of the 19th century that Christiana and John would actually use a barn as an impromptu net, and she would bowl to him, and apparently they trained the dog to field the ball.
Oh, fantastic. What a great use of a dog. For those dog lovers out there.
Fantastic. And that lovely line that Christiana, John and the dog could take on any 11 in England and probably...
Love
The problem with round arm bowling in those days, of course, because it was so radical, it was... and it gave the bowler such an advantage. It was deemed to be a little bit too much, and for about 25 to 30 years, there was something of a friction around this. John Willis went on to take part in a game in 1822 at Lord's between Kent and the MCC, where he was constantly no-balled for bowling round arm, to the point where he said, right, that's it, I'm off. Left the field of play, got into his carriage and never touched the ball again, apparently.
Oh, wow. It sounds like a sort of a Darryl Hare Moorley moment, that, doesn't it, really?
It does, rather. It does. The point is not lost that Christiana and John, between them, obviously as part of two of the early pioneers of round arm bowling, their place in history is pretty much immutable. There was the suggestion that Christiana bowled round arm because she couldn't actually bowl underarm wearing a hooped skirt.
Yeah.
Which is a lovely idea, apart from the fact that hooped skirts were no longer in fashion in those days.
Oh.
But I think it's more a case of the realisation, particularly after one or two people had done it before, that if they actually perfected it and worked at it, then it could be an incredibly powerful addition to your armoury. Lily Poulett Harris in Tasmania, who was probably the pioneer of women's cricket in Australia and founded the first club in Oyster Cove in Tasmania in 1894.
Wow.
Which was the first ladies' cricket club in Australia. Of course, any mention of women in cricket, and particularly those who changed the game, you cannot fail to mention Rachel Hayhoe Flint.
Yeah.
Of course, who I think Shield Berry described her as the W.G. Grace of the women's game. And she did so much to effectively to make the game recognisable as something that women could do and be competitive and actually play to a really high standard.
Yeah.
And an international playing career of over 20 years speaks volumes.
Yeah, that's an amazing achievement for any player, isn't it, that?
Absolutely.
No, it's excellent. It's excellent. And I mean, just even more recently, I remember Charlotte Edwards being a massive pioneer for the England women's team, and those around her. Claire Taylor, I think, is the all-time leading run scorer. I might have got that.
Yeah, I believe so.
And
of course, Sarah Taylor, probably one of the best keepers, if not certainly the best in the women's game, and quite genuinely one of the best in the world game now.
Yeah, Yeah. Some of her takes standing up are really amazing for those that haven't seen her.
Astonishing. She has the reactions of a housefly.
Yeah. No, it is
She's
amazing, and
incredibly fast.
it's great to sort of hear in, I guess, the journey. And I know there have been a lot of women, not that long ago, really having to battle, unfortunately, for their kind of opportunities in cricket, which is sad to hear. But ultimately now, hopefully, by the foundations laid by these people and the efforts they went to in order to play and to grow the game, hopefully now we're coming the other side of that tunnel where there's much more opportunities and it's far wider spread and grows the game as we want it to grow.
Yeah, yeah. The thing that to me really stands out there is the roots of women's cricket are as buried as deep as the roots of men's cricket.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting take. In fact, you've highlighted a couple that even I've never really considered just in this short passage now, and I think it's a great opportunity, I suppose, and a great place to sort of leave this week's history podcast, because who knows what's coming to the future, and who knows what we'll be saying in another 20 years time around where the game has gone, especially for women, and it's thanks a lot to these women who changed the game hundreds of years ago.
Absolute trailblazers.
For our viewers each week, we'll be looking to do some level of family tale or moment in time. Ian, what have you got for us this week?
A moment in time, something that prompted me to think of, albeit a slightly tenuous link to the sad news about Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. If you cast your mind back to 1953 and Christmas, on Christmas Eve there was a horrible disaster in New Zealand. Bridge collapse at Tangiwai and a train going over it at the time, which led to, I think it was 151 people very, very sadly killed. As it happened, the newly crowned Queen and Duke of Edinburgh were actually in New Zealand at the time. At the same time as the disaster, New Zealand were playing South Africa in a test match, which started on Christmas Day, which was when the news broke. And then on Boxing Day, the game resumed, and even more tragic, one of the New Zealand players, Bob Blair, his fiancée was one of those who was killed in the crash.
Oh, no.
And so obviously over the rest day, it was announced that he would withdraw from the game, quite understandably. When the game started on Boxing Day, South African opening bowler Neil Adcock, in his first Test series, bowling very quickly on what was proving to be a very lively pitch, was getting the ball to rear. He hit pretty much every one of the New Zealand batsmen. A couple of them were bowled off the body onto the stumps. He hit Laurie Miller, who is the, I think, number 5 batsman, on the chest, forced him to retire hurt. He was coughing blood.
Yeah.
He hit Bert Sutcliffe, who is the left-handed number 4 batsman, hit him on the side of the head, third ball of his innings, and knocked him out. He then retired hurt. So there's two of the top batsmen in hospital already, and with another player out of the side. So the innings cascading into ruins. When the 6th wicket fell, obviously everybody then thought, right, that's it, the end of the innings, and started to walk off, only to see Laurie Miller coming walking out, having been strapped up and dragged himself from hospital to come out and carry on his innings. He hung around for about another 45 minutes, made a really brave, really gritty 14 before he was out. And then, of course, everybody started walking off again, only to then see Bert Sutcliffe walking out.
The resurrection.
He's come from hospital. He's swathed in bandages, almost looking like a Sikh.
Yeah.
There's so much bandage. He's still bleeding from the side of his head, and he started to carry on his innings. He took the view, possibly augmented by a certain amount of Scottish spirit as opposed to Dutch courage. He probably felt that he couldn't really just try and push and prod and poke it around, but try and fight fire with fire. But then his partner, I can't remember who the non-striker, but the other batsman was. He was out, so of course everybody starts walking off again, thinking that's it, and everything stopped. Everything went absolutely silent. The whole of Johannesburg ground went silent because the person walking out to bat was Bob Blair.
Oh.
And he came out to bat. All the New Zealand players in the changing room watching with tears flooding down their faces. The South Africans, not much better. And Sutcliffe walked up to him, put his arm around him and said, "This is no place for us. Let's just give it a whack. Let's get on with it and see what happens." And I'm getting emotional even just telling you this. They took 25, which was then the world record for a number of runs off and over.
Wow.
From one over from Tayfield. And Sutcliffe hit him for 3 straight sixes, straight back over his head, bang, 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 took a single, and then Blair hit one over mid-wicket. The only scoring shot of his innings was a 6 over mid-wicket. They took 25 off that one over. They added 35 in literally about 12 balls before Blair was out, leaving Sutcliffe not out 80. And all of those 80 runs having been made after he got hit on the head, bleeding still. And as they walked off, the whole place just erupted. And at that moment, as they walked off, and Sutcliffe just stood back to let Blair go through in front of him, through the gate, and they went off, arms around each other's shoulders, into the tunnel. That's a moment in time.
Brilliant. Brilliant, Ian. Ian, it's been brilliant to have you this week. Can't wait till next week. You take care.
My pleasure. All the best.
Cheers, bud. Bye.